Hello and welcome to The Weekly Yes, a podcast where two best friends talk about their joint mission to say yes to life. I am your host, Jara Skagfjord, and co-host is my bestie, the amazing Kristin Guerin. On today's episode, we talk about how we can speed things up by being conscious of the present moment. Kristin shares a magical night of music and art that could only have happened because of this experiment. And we discuss how saying yes can trigger feelings of guilt towards the people in your life. Today, I won't be sharing any fast facts before the episode, as most things speak for themselves today. Instead, I'm going to express my gratitude to you for listening to our humble podcast and invite you to join us on a journey of yes, to start saying yes to life and see where it leads you. And since you're saying yes to things, how about saying yes to hitting the follow button or subscribe to this podcast, or better yet, share it with a friend? I know that was a little sneaky of me, but seriously, thank you for being here. And now I will drop you straight into our conversation. Enjoy. I was even thinking last night, I was like, wait, we're going to record our third episode? Like, this is our third week of doing this? I'm like, that means almost a month of doing something, you know?
That's a good point. That is almost a month.
We're committed. We're doing this thing.
And it came out of nowhere, too. I mean, it came out of you saying, let's do the thing, and me being like, okay. And then it just happened.
And then it just happened. I guess that's how things also, this is happening. I don't know if you're noticing this, but I'm like, things are happening really quickly. That's just of interest to me because normally I feel a lot more resistance to doing new things or starting projects or even continuing with projects. And now I'm just like, I'm a little suspicious of it. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm a little suspicious that things are moving so quickly with this thing.
I wonder what's happening. I'm feeling a similar, I actually had a moment in my morning pages this morning where I was like, this is such an interesting thing. I said, what if I just changed now? I've always kind of had this thing, even as a kid, where I would be like, oh, tomorrow I'll study French better, or tomorrow I'll, you know what I mean? Tomorrow I'll like have the perfect day, right? I'll wake up early and I'll do the thing. And so it's always been like almost needing like a blank slate. So this morning I was doing my morning pages and I kept checking Instagram. I was like, what are you doing? Like, stop and just do your freaking morning pages, Guerin. And in my head, I was like, okay, well, tomorrow I won't look at Instagram. I'll like keep my phone on the other side of the room. And I said, well, what if just for like the rest of these pages, you didn't look at Instagram? Like, what if we could start it now? And I was like, wow, that was actually such a like kind of mind-blowing thing for me. What's past is past. And like, the future doesn't start tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. when my alarm goes off. The future starts in this exact moment. And like now this moment and this, and I was like, oh, that kind of, I don't know, it's really empowering. So
that's kind of cool. That's like very meta, very quantum physics kind of Yeah, I feel like in that moment, you collapse the timeline a little bit. So instead of doing it tomorrow, you did it in the moment. So you sped things up. That's probably what people talk about when they say collapsing timelines. Like, it always sounds like something, it's something that people talk about a lot in the spiritual world. A lot of accounts that I see on Instagram talk about collapsing timelines. That sounds like a monstrous task to do, to like collapse a whole timeline, but maybe it's just in a tiny little moment like that.
Yeah.
So what was your yes this week? No segue. Collapsing the timeline. I'm asking you now.
Okay, so what I said I was last week, which hit hard. I said it, and it really must have collapsed the timeline. It said, it like immediately shifted things. So I said I was going to work on self-expression this week. I was going to say yes to self-expression. And like my personal self-expression, not expressing what other people want me to say or what I think other people want me to say. Or what came up for me was like, oh, I'm worthy of love from these people if I say or I do or act the way that they want me to act. Which that's completely separate things. Your worth, you're like I am worthy of love exactly as I am, regardless of how I express myself, regardless of if I express myself. They're completely different things. They're like talking about apples and a beach. It's not like apples and oranges. So that was my thing. And I immediately, as soon as I said it on Tuesday morning, we recorded this podcast, Tuesday night, I was asked to do 2 separate interviews, including one for the New York Times, out of the blue. That's a New Girl reference for those who don't know. Out of the blue. I was asked to do 2 random interviews, and I was in a crowd of like tens of thousands of people in New York City. Like, why me? I wasn't, you know what I mean? Like, it was really just like the universe being like, you asked to practice this. And then the next day I gave a giant speech, which was another opportunity to be like to like a large group of people. And in both situations, all three situations, I should say, I was like, okay, let's, as we were speaking about like the ego last week and my rising Leo ego issues, to be able to say like, the speech, I had prepared a speech and I kind of just like for the speech, I'd thrown it out the window. And for the interviews, I hadn't prepared anything, but I was like, well, I want these to be like good. Like I want to look good and smart and cool. And you know what I mean? And like, I know what I'm talking about, very ego-y. And at the end of the day, like I just said, okay, like light, okay, universe, speak through me in the way that you want to, like, I'm a vessel, go crazy, say what you need to say through me in this moment. Yeah. And it felt like I didn't do force the self-expression. I was able to just speak, like it was allowed to flow. Like Kristen's, self was just able to flow through the words and what I needed to say in that moment to bring the most amount of light in the world. Yeah, I think they all went well. So that was my yes, that how I followed through on it. What was yours?
That's wild that it was so immediate. Because, a lot of people, if I'm just thinking about you in particular, these are like interviews. This is public self-expression. Like if maybe another person had asked for self-expression, they might, I don't know, need to make small talk with the barista. You know what I mean? Like it could have showed up in just like small moments like that. But for you, it showed up in pretty big public moments.
Yeah.
So that's wild. That's pretty cool. So my yes last week was to say yes to my inner artist. And I just failed miserably. I'm just going to say it. Like it just was like the week was really, really rough because, it's just things have been really heavy in my household. So like a few days after, I was just like, wait, what was my yes? I'm like, oh my God, like I'm totally failing.
Yeah.
I haven't said yes to any. And in my head, I'm like, have there been opportunities? So I kind of started to like blame the external world. I'm like, well, there haven't been any opportunities. I'm like, well, that's not true. The opportunities are literally all around you right now. Like if you look up, like there's a pen and paper. You know what I mean? Like you could write things or you could draw. Like there's a guitar in the corner. There's like, there's a piano right. I'm looking at a piano on my left and a guitar on my right. Like you're literally in your body that, contains a voice. You know what I mean? I'm just like, that's not, it was just like me kind of holding myself accountable. I'm like, that's not really true. That's not really an excuse. Like and in my head, it was also because we were talking about perfectionism of how the opportunity doesn't have to look a particular way. I can also just start doing something and just say yes to myself or just like check in with myself. It's like, what do I want to do? And say yes to that. Like that's also what the yes can be. It doesn't have to be like something happens in my external world and then I react to it. Like it can come from me, if that makes sense. So I was like very disappointed in myself, obviously. Like, doing it wrong. So I got upset with myself, felt like I was running out of time. I wasn't actively saying no, if that makes sense. It just felt like I was just like on autopilot. I just wasn't really paying attention. And partly because I just was exhausted, But then I actually did say yes to 2 days ago on Sunday night. And that was when I had written a whole thing in my notes about like, how I was going to take the fact that I hadn't said yes to anything and how I was going to talk about that on this podcast. You know what I mean? Okay, I'm just going to use it. I'm just going to use it as like a starting off point for talking about what it's like when you sometimes forget to say yes or whatever. I'm like, that can also be a topic. Like that's not an issue. But then an opportunity presented itself. I was working and I go into a tab where there's a Google Maps and it was like super zoomed in on my neighborhood. And I see this sort of like huge promotional thing for a concert venue that is close by. And I was like, oh, I wonder if they have a show tonight. So I clicked on it, and because it's Sunday and you never know, and they did, and I was like, great, I'm gonna go. And I just like decided to go, and I texted my husband. I'm like, hey, I'm going to this concert. Do you want to come? I'm gonna go regardless because I have to say yes. So if you want to join me, great. If not, that's also fine. And he was like, sure. And then I picked him up and we got like a nice dinner. So it was like kind of like a surprise date night that we haven't had in a long time. So that was really nice. And so we went to a concert and it was lovely. However, I was like, during the concert, I started like my perfectionism started to show up again. I was like, oh, like this music is not really my cup of tea. Like it's not something that's like, oh, it doesn't feel like this is like a life-changing moment. And I'm like, that's not the point. And I literally talked about this last week. I literally said the words, that you're not saying yes or no for a particular outcome. You're just doing it, you're just doing it. You're just going with the flow. So like I caught myself in moments this week of being like, like I said yes, but it's not really what I thought it was going to be. What did you think it was going to be? I don't even know what this part of my brain is expecting from this thing. But it was still lovely and he was wonderful and we had a great time, right? And then we left the venue and I look to my left and I see this alley and I'm like, I see it's sort of a shortcut to our parking lot. I'm like, let's go this way. And Yazine's like, okay. Weirdo going through an alleyway when it's dark, but I knew it would be a shortcut. So we walked down the path and then Yatin stops and he turns around and he's like, wait, hold on. This would be a perfect location for the short film that we're writing. And I was like, what? Oh, yeah, you're totally right. So I was like, like what I said yes to led to a thing that wasn't even on my radar.
Wow.
Like it's not even, I have not been scouting locations or anything. It's just been a thing that's sort of been in the ether. Oh yeah, we're going to shoot this short film soon. Yeah, we're going to look for locations soon. And it just came to us in that moment because I said yes to something.
Wow.
And because Yadin said yes to my invitation, because I don't think I would have noticed on my own if I had, I don't even think I would have turned left if Yadin hadn't been with me. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't have gone alone.
I would hope not.
Down a dark alleyway. Anyway.
There are certain things we should say no to.
Yes. Agreed. Say yes to safety always. Yeah. So that was a lovely little thing that came out of that one yes,
Wow. Okay, what I love about that is you said you were going to say yes to, wait, what was the phrasing? Your artistic?
My inner artist.
Your inner artist this week. And it's so interesting that your inner artist right now is working on a short film with your husband. And it was sort of like you said to the universe, this is what I'm working on this week. Give me opportunities. And the universe was like, okay, let me show you your location. Let me show you like the next bit of inspiration too. I always think that like as a generator, I don't know if I mentioned this, but as a generator is supposed to, you're not a generator, but nonetheless, I think it's important for everybody. You're supposed to respond to what excites you, So you need external stimulus. So you need to be inspired by things. You need like information. You go to a concert and it inspires you. You walk down the street and like the flowers inspire you. I was walking the other day past a church and I was like, oh, like that, like the incense, like the smell of the incense. I was like, oh, like that gives me an idea for this project I'm working on, this theater project I'm working on. I was like, oh, like what if that was included in this some way? And it's like that sort of external stimulus. So you showing up and saying yes to something, the universe provided what your ask was. It was like, here's your artistic development. Here's your inner artist. And the way in which it did that was inspiring you to take the next step in your short film. So it's not like, it's sort of like I said, I want self-expression. I didn't have to like go email the New York Times and be like, hey, I'd love to do an interview. Like they came to me.
I am currently working on my own self-expression. It'd be like, is this nuts?
What? Instead, I just said yes to a friend's offer. She was like, I'm going to this vigil on Tuesday night. Would you like to attend? I was like, yes, I have to say yes to you. So yes, I'm going to go. And then the opportunity for self-expression came to me, right? I think that's really important. I think there's something to that about like trusting, just asking for it and trusting that the universe will provide in some way and just saying yes to the whatever might come up, even if you're like, I don't see how it can act. This is so, I feel like we were talking about this, or maybe it was with someone else, but I was talking about how presumptuous of me. I'm working on this theater piece right now. And I feel like I've been stopping myself a lot in creating this, like so much. I'm like, what is stopping me? Why am I stopping myself? What's happening here? And ultimately I was like, you know what it is I'm trying to produce the play. I'm trying to figure out the way that the play is going to be lit. Trying to figure out the costume design before I have a topic or like before I have a script or before, you know what I mean? And it's like, wow, how presumptuous of me to think I know where this is going. You know what I mean?
Yes.
To be like, wow, what a jerk. I think I know better than like what the creator wants to create through me.
Mm-hmm,
you know what I mean? Like, how dare I try to micromanage the end product instead of just following the path? And so it is like, and ultimately that's what saying yes is about, or like, saying yes to life is like, so like you and I drove Atlanta to LA. From Atlanta, when we left, Yara and I had a week-long road trip.
A week.
And when you're in LA, you know what you cannot see? The sign that says welcome to Los Angeles. When you're leaving Atlanta, you cannot see that sign that says welcome to Los Angeles. You can see the sign that says like, this is the road that you have to take to the other road, to the other road. And there's 1,000 roads. It's not even like there's just one road. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like you're not going to see when you're on a long road trip, like you only see like the next big, Memphis, like, that's the next big city. And then like at a certain point, when we reached a certain point, we would start to see Los Angeles on signs. But it wasn't until like way, way later, like days later,
like
that
Palm Springs.
Yeah, exactly.
When we started to finally see signs to Los Angeles.
That's a great metaphor.
I agree. And I don't know what the theater piece is going to look like. I don't know what the short film is going to look like. Whatever you're making, all you can see is to the next bend, right? So all you have to do is say yes to the next bend.
Mhm.
And then trust that when you get there, you can see to the next bend and you say yes to that. Yeah. So that was me being like, boy, I want to say yes to what's in front of me and trust that it will lead me to where I'm supposed to go.
I wrote this in my morning pages. It was this summer when I was starting to unravel my perfectionism. And my mantra was, the universe knows better than me. It's the illusion of control. It's the illusion that we're actually in control of every aspect of our lives. Or like, if I just do this, if I just do that, if I just get this degree, if I just marry this person, if I just buy the house or whatever it is, then X, Y, and Z. Like, then I'll be happy. Then I'll be content. Then I'll be able to do the next thing. Then, or whatever it is. And that's not, that's not true. That if I take that step, that means automatically that this will happen. Like that's us trying to, like you said, like micromanage or like control the outcome. And that actually stifles the potential. Like we can only see so far. And there's a huge, great, big vastness of even more potential and more possibility that we can't even imagine. So there has to be space for that to come in so that it can actually, the thing that we're trying to create, or us, can actually reach that full potential.
I did have another really exciting yes this week that I really want to share.
Please.
So I went for a walk. I think I went for a walk because you sent me a bunch of audios and it was the end of the workday on Friday and I wanted to go listen to your audios. Yara and I talk nonstop. Like,
and we call our audios podcasts, by the way.
Yeah, they are.
Oh, I'm going to go listen to your podcast now because that's how long they are. And I love it.
It's like at least minimum of 30 minutes. So I was this is just a funny little anecdote. I was with a friend a few weeks ago and he says, you must have audioed me or something. Or I said, I got to tell Yara this. And I must have texted you immediately. I think that's what happened. And he says, how often do you talk to Yara? And I think he was expecting me to be like, like once a day, every other day or whatever. And I was like, like every hour? Like always? Like I'm in a constant, like, I don't understand the question. Like how often I talk to you? Like, every minute? Like I literally looked at my phone and I was like, I haven't heard from her in like 20 minutes. Wonder what she's doing now. Like
I can confirm this is true. It's more like, when are we not talking?
That's really the question. Yeah, for sure. And we're also on opposite sleep schedules. So I feel like I get audios from you like really late and you get them from me really early. So there's really just like a 4-hour period of time in the day.
Yep.
When we're both sleeping. That's really funny. Okay. Anyway, so I went for a walk listening to your podcast, your audios that you sent me. And I get like a block and a half from my apartment and I see this sign, this banner for this art show gallery that's going. And I have passed this sign probably like 3 times a year for 4 years of living here. And I've always, again, like I've been working through it. And I used to have like crippling social anxiety. It's much better now. But, years and years of working through that, I'm finally able to like actually be a social human being. And I go in and I said to myself, I see the banner and I was like, oh, like, I don't want to go to that. Like, that's like my whole body tensed up. And I was like, oh, like there's so much, like, again, like that social anxiety, it's still there to a certain extent. I was like, I don't want to go in there. And like, I don't know these people. I don't, you know what I mean? I'm all alone. Like, I don't know. And I said, well, I see a banner. I guess I have to say yes to it. And so I was like, all right, I guess I'm going. So I went into the studio. I'd never been to this space, block and a half from my apartment, gorgeous little artistic community, beautiful art, gorgeous showcase. And I wound up having this really beautiful conversation for like a half hour, 45 minutes with these 3 like curators, the people who like run the gallery and the art space. And they are just, oh my gosh, they're incredible. The fact that it's just such a collaborative community, it's art for art's sake. It's not art for like commercial sake. It's not art for like making money. It was free. It was entirely just open to the public. It was amazing. And they said to me, so we're chatting a bit and they said, oh, you have to come back tonight for live music. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, if I can, I'll be there. And they were like, no, you have to come. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, are you kidding me? So I came back. I came back at 8, all alone again. I was alone both times. And I walked into this again. Like, this is scary for me. Like, to say yes to like social interaction is terrifying, especially doing it alone, especially like, not knowing anyone or the space or like, yeah, it was scary. Anyway, so I go in and it was the most magical evening. These two musicians, Christopher and Sienna Sears, look them up, gorgeous music. Oh my goodness. It was just magic. It was a purely magical experience. And I talked to the artists after, these two musical artists. One of them is also a theater artist. And I was like, oh, me too. And, we're chatting about what we've been working on. And he was like, and I told him about Constellation Theater, this project I'm working on. And he was like, why don't we do a day here? Like, Sienna and I will come back. We'll do a night of Constellation Theater and music and live music. And I was like, so again, it was yeah, I have to say yes to it. Again, it was a question. I have to say yes to this. So anyway, it was just the most magical little experience. And I'm so glad I said yes to the banner, or I wouldn't have met these people. I was just like, again, like this, I had no idea what I was saying yes to. I didn't know what this banner was. It could have been a horrible show. It was, wound up being definitely like fuel for my creative artist too, which is really cool.
I like that. Sometimes the yes is just kind of what you were saying earlier about just you're allowing the inspiration to come to you by saying yes. It's so interesting because I'm thinking about the word inspired, and it's like in spirit. It's like you are allowing a spirit in, like you're allowing the divine in.
I love that. I was also thinking, similar to what you were saying earlier, of like, what is, like, it's not just external people saying like, hey, do you want to go to the ballet with me? Do you want to go to the, it's not like, and having to say yes to this, having to say yes to an interview or whatever. It's also like, what are we responding to? Where are the questions coming from? I think, like you said, like there was a prompt in front of you of like, there's paper and a pen in front of me. There's a piano over here. There's a guitar over here. Like, those are also prompts to say yes to. And like, this is a banner. Like, I had to say yes to a banner.
Yeah.
Or I had to say yes to my homework. And these are all opportunities to say yes. I think that kind of blows my mind too, right?
Yeah. So what do you want to say yes to this week?
What do I want to say yes to this week? Do you know what you want to say yes to this week?
It's a good question. I don't think I know.
So I had two things.
Yes.
I had written down the other day saying I want to say yes to, I want to take my artistic recovery seriously. I want to say yes to my artistic recovery and take it seriously. I feel like I've been coasting, which is so funny to say. This is very Pisces of me to be able to be like, I'm coasting through like this deep emotional experience, like spiritual transformation. I'm just kind of coasting. And I feel like I was like this in theology school too, where it was just like, I would just honestly BS. Like, I would read like 3 pages of a book and be able to just BS about the spiritual state of the world. I think it's a thing that I have an opportunity to really work through some stuff and process stuff. I come out more healed and able to do the work I want to do, or I can just keep not showing up fully. So I'm going to choose the former, and I'm going to say yes to my artistic recovery. I'm going to take myself seriously. That means right now I'm in this artist bay group with Barbara Howland. I'm sure we've mentioned this before. It's absolutely wonderful.
I put her in the show notes last week.
Oh, did you? Great. Yeah. Good. And yeah, and I feel like I want to take my artistic recovery seriously this week. But let's just say that for now.
All right. I think that I want to say yes to, okay, I'm going to talk about something that has been on my mind. So here's what I want to talk about. I have been feeling a little guilty, or a little, maybe not guilty, but a little concerned. It has been on my mind that, like, how do you, in good conscience, just, because of the state of the world, and because my partner right now is in a very different state of mind than I am. I am in a state of mind of saying yes to life. And how does one do that when you live with someone or you have a partner who is not there, right? So then when I want to say yes to things, it's sort of like this little pinch of guilt. Or I even wrote here in my note, like, how can you in good conscience say yes when other people are not in a place to do so, even beyond my partner, just like thinking about the state of the world and just like, there are like what luxury this is
Mm,
that I am
yeah.
able to say yes to, like a banner,
Yeah.
like to going to an art gallery, like saying yes to going to a concert, like, yeah, it was just something that was on my mind this morning. So I think that might be something that I'm gonna work through this week, or just like
Yeah.
really practicing, like really saying yes without the guilt, or without the guilt. Because in the past, it's sort of been like I tend to. It's sort of like this really sort of volatile back and forth between like holding myself back to make other people feel comfortable, to not rock the boat, to like keep the peace. And then eventually that explodes. And then I have to like throw a rock at the glass ceiling and like rebel and just like, like charge, like there's no, because you can't hold back anymore. Like you can't keep the peace anymore. Like you just have to sort of like break through the shackles that you created yourself,
Yeah.
essentially is what it is. Yeah, so there's no, I don't think there's necessarily an answer to these questions of like
Mm,
how do you do that, or like, is it okay, or like, you know what I mean? I don't think it's just questions that were coming up for me, and it's something that like, because a lot of the times like saying yes is scary, not just because you're working through your own stuff, but because it might affect the people around you.
yeah.
Or like when I've said yes to certain things in the past. I remember, I'll tell a little story here. I had a boyfriend many years ago who was very jealous, very, very jealous, not jealous of other men, but very jealous of the things that I was doing. And he made it impossible for me to enjoy my things. I was very, very young, so I'm not saying, like, nowadays I would say like, Yara, you have autonomy and you have, you know what I mean? But this
Hmm.
was like one of my first boyfriends, and you kind of, you don't know what you're doing. But like looking back, I'm like, I just didn't know how to stand up for myself. I didn't know how to talk to him. Like I didn't know how to just go for things anyway. And I didn't have any friends or like people around me that I could really ask for advice, because they weren't in relationships like I was, so I was kind of just like all by myself, kind of like figuring things out. So I didn't know what the best thing to do was, and I was scared to like talk to people about it too, because I knew on the inside that I'm a little ashamed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there were also certain things that I was offered that I just said no thank you to, like right off the bat. There were like incredible opportunities, because I knew that he was going to be mad.
Mm,
So we were both artists, right? And he always going to be mad because this is the lead role for this, and he hasn't been offered, or like he didn't get a call back. Like it was like a whole like it was just a terrible situation. It was a terrible situation, and I didn't know how to get myself out of it. Like I just didn't know. I was very, very
yeah.
young, and I couldn't find a way out. And what wound up happening is I just said no, 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 to just like to avoid fights. Yeah, exactly. I'm like boxing myself in physically right now. People can't see it. Yeah, I just boxed myself in.
Yeah.
And like, and he and in his home, even we spent
Mm,
most of the time in his home. Yeah, so I'm just like, I'm saying this because I'm remembering a time where I remember so like quite literally saying no to things. It was just like a
yeah.
period of time in my life that I look back and I was like, wow, I said no to so many things. But even the things that I did say yes to, I made myself miserable within them to make him feel better.
Hmm. I get that.
So it's just something that's coming up of like how to navigate that, like, oh, saying yes to things and choosing to do more or expand, or like doing all these things, it affects other people around you,
Yeah.
you know or you might sometimes, even if it's not like people directly around you, you might maybe subconsciously be holding yourself back because there are other people in the world that are experiencing pain.
My what I'm going to say yes to this week, I'm changing it. Thank you for that. That was so beautiful. And I think it's very similar. I think it's very related to what you're talking about. I think these are like probably parallel things going on. I struggle a lot with asking for help.
Mm.
And I had this realization a day or two ago, a couple days ago. I realized in not asking for help, I am withholding the opportunity for somebody else to say yes. I'm not allowing someone
Ooh.
the opportunity to say yes to life. by not even presenting the option to me, right? By being like, do you want to help me with this project? Do you want to donate to my organization? Do you want to, you know what I mean? These are all opportunities to say yes to life, to help the world, in helping our organization, in co-creating. Oh my goodness, these are amazing opportunities that I have at my disposal. But because I'm afraid of asking for help, I'm not allowing other people to say yes. I'm not even giving them the opportunity to say yes. I do think this is super related to what you were just saying. So my intention for the week, my intention for the week is to present other people with the opportunity to say yes to the things that I am doing and I want to say yes to.
Yeah.
My whole system is fighting that as I say that. They're like, please don't say that, because then we have to do it.
No, it's vulnerable. You're letting people in on your yes, essentially.
That's so scary. Yeah, I think this is super related. I think we're hitting on the same thing. Also, you know what it reminds me of is this principle, this like spiritual principle that says we're all here to work through our stuff, right? Like we all came on this earth, manifested to work through our personal issues. And we meet other people. And the purpose of meeting other people and having these relationships is to be triggered and to be forced to work through it. Like we set ourselves up to be challenged and triggered. And we're like, I'm going to meet you when I'm 27 and going through a breakup because you're going to force me to blah, 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 you know, you're going to trigger this issue I have or whatever. And it's like, wow, by not saying yes to ourselves and like me personally, like I'm not saying yes to like being my full self, being my full expressive self and living my full life, then I'm actually like harming other people because I'm not triggering them. You know what I mean? Like you're welcome for triggering you. Isn't that crazy to think about?
That's actually crazy to think about. I never thought of it like that.
Like, how dare I take away your opportunity for growth by keeping myself small so I don't trigger you?
Exactly.
You're welcome for the trigger.
No, it's so true. And again, it goes back to the presumptuous thing of like, who am I to think what is best for you? You know what I mean? Like I kept saying no, or, you know, I kept making myself small because I didn't want to make him mad. When in reality, maybe the best thing for him would have been to experience anger and to be mad.
Yeah, 100% agree with that.
Anyway, that was just like
and
a,
if you're not
small
give
little
it to
example.
Him, if you're not going to give it to him, then he's got to go find it elsewhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So there's definitely something here to be said about, you know, saying yes anyway, regardless to loyalties you might have to your partner, to your friends, to the place you work, to, you know, like there might be all kinds of subconscious even loyalties going on. Could even be more subconscious. It could be like to your parents, like you don't want to, you know, if you say yes to this job or to this promotion, that means that you will have outdone your parents, you know, or like, oh, if I say yes to this job, I'm making more money than my parents. And maybe subconsciously you have a certain loyalty to them to not do that. And this is not something that this is something that happens on a very subconscious, like soul level. But that could be something that is worth exploring for me this week. Is like, oh, why am I not saying yes to things? Like what loyalties lie there? So if I say yes, it feels scary, not just because the thing is scary, because I am breaking a contract or I'm breaking a promise subconsciously. Whew, that got deep.
This is gonna be an interesting week. We just set ourselves up for.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, I just want to point out that we're in the middle of eclipse season, so maybe it's no surprise that we're getting a little deep. And I mean, this episode started with like a whole, what was it that we were talking about? Like the quantum physics, like collapsing timelines. Like that's what we were talking about.
Right. That's right.
So let's collapse some timelines this week, and we'll talk about how that went next week.
Yay.
Okay, bye. That concludes this week's episode of The Weekly Yes. You will find us on all major podcast platforms as well as YouTube, and you can follow us on Instagram as well at The Weekly Yes. We encourage you to keep saying yes without guilt this week and perhaps offer someone else the opportunity to say yes. And if you feel inspired to share with us what you said yes to, you can email us at theweeklyyes@gmail.com. Perhaps we'll feature your story in an upcoming episode. Keep saying yes, and we'll see you next week.